All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk about translatable routes in NextJS. Maybe a quick question first. Anyone some experience with NextJS? A couple. All right. I'll start with a little bit about myself. My name is Lucas van Hoof. I'm 26 years old. I have about 2 years of work experience as a full-stack web/app developer at Kodana. But translatable routes, why would you want to use it? Maybe quick introduction. What are translatable routes? Maybe the simplest explanation is a website with a /nl/over ons. And then in English, it's /en/about us. So the URL gets translated completely. What are the advantages of this? First of all, most importantly, it's very beneficial for SEO. The search engines can serve the content to the end user in their preferred language, which will most likely earn you a higher rating in the search engines ranking, the site ranking on their search pages for Google, for example. And being multilingual is always a plus. It can simply just be a client requirement. For example, we have at Kodana, we have a project for the government. They have employees that speak Dutch. They have employees that speak French and some German. So their internal tool should be accessible in all the languages. The routes should be available in all the languages, all the separate languages, and perhaps English as well. Even though in Belgium we only have Dutch, French, and a little bit of German. But English is never a bad language to have because most of the people speak it anyway. And the user experience is always better when you can browse the site in your own language, in your own preferred language. Now the problems we tackled in the past with the translating routes in NextJS is the NextJS config, which is used to handle the rewrites. So in a NextJS application, you always have your pages router, which is a file-based router, but you cannot only, but mostly you have your routes built in English. And we need to find a way to rewrite, it's in the name, rewrite the URL. For example, if we want to go to the NL over ons pagina, we need to have a way to rewrite the URL to the English variant to know which page, so Next knows which page to show to the user. But the NextJS config only supports JavaScript. And we all know as developers, if you want to do it in JavaScript, we must be sure to not make mistakes. And we all know we do. So we also need to specify it in a specific format so NextJS can use it to handle the rewrites. But it's a really, really error-prone approach to do it in the config, just in JavaScript, without any form of checking on what we are actually putting into it. And another problem we had with, it was not our first project where we had to implement the translatable routes. We kept reinventing the wheel over and over and over and over again. So we took a look at a project a couple of years back. We took a couple snippets. We put it in our new project, and it didn't work. So we are wasting time, once again, trying to figure out why it's not working, why it worked X years ago, why doesn't it work right now? So it's a lot of wasted time, for nothing, for something that actually should be quite simple. And then the developer experience, as I mentioned, it's all in JavaScript. We have no idea what routes we put in. Maybe if you're working with a couple people on the project, somebody adds a route, you don't know what route he added, or you always have to go back to the config, look at all the routes there are. Not that amazing developer experience, and also there is no way for you to know if you made a typo, if you missed a route, if you mistyped a route, if you forgot to pass a parameter or something. So bad developer experience because it's really, really error prone. So the solution, we did at Codana, we did the last complete rewrite of the way we implement translatable routes. So we started from scratch. We started with the latest version of the library where it's built on, because it's built partly on I18N Next for the locale management. Then we wrote unit tests for every function we use or made in the library, so we can be sure in the future if we add new features, if we fix a bug or something, we can run our test suite and know nothing from our previous versions will break ever again. And then, of course, package it, because we cannot waste time just going back to old projects, putting it in, taking snippets, pasting it in a new project, hoping it will work, it won't work, etc. So we have a package, we just install it, and we're done with it. So let's implement it in a really simple way. At Codana, we like to use a monorepo structure. We are all in on Turbo repo from Vercel, same makers as NextJS. So in our project, we like to use a monorepo structure. So we create a little package, as it's called, for our translatable routes. You can do it in just a normal repo just fine, but this just simplifies the process a little bit because you have a separation of concerns, and it is easier. But I'll show that in a couple slides later. It's easier because you'll need a build step, and it's easier in a monorepo to structure that properly. So first things first, we installed the translatable routes package. I use PNPM here. It doesn't really matter what package manager you bring. Then the first step is to the first step is to create an array of supported locales. So we have English, German, French, and Dutch. It's also important to note the ascons notation there, because it's important for the type inheritance later on. And we also export this variable because we probably want to use it in a language switcher or to have a list of all available locales in our application. Next up is the most important part, the project routes. It's an object. You can call it whatever you want. I called it project routes. The name doesn't really matter. And then you list all your routes. You can have two types of routes. You can have the when it's just a string as the value for the key. That means that in all the locales, the URL will be the same. So for example, now it's the root URL because it will always be the same in every language because there is nothing to translate. But for example, if you would have a FAQ page, that would also just be a string because FAQ is in every language the same. And you also have an object. You can see the object has all the keys from our previous array. Also, if we, that's in the next step, if we would forget, for example, if we would not translate it in English or something, we would get type errors along the way in the next step. So it's really important to fill in all the locales that you have in your application, or else TypeScript will be mad at you. And then once again, we also export this because we probably want it in a separate file because the list can get quite big. And then it's time to import our first function from our library. That's the create translation config. You're gonna make your route config. This function will take the array we specified previously. Then you give it a default locale. This is also typed and type hinted to be one of the 4 that you put in your available locales array. So you cannot pass a default locale that does not exist in your translations. And also your project routes, we created the step before. And here is where I mentioned if you're the project routes, if you would have forgotten, for example, the English key, then you would also get type errors here that your route object, your routes object is not complete and missing some keys. And then once again, also we export this function because we will need it to import it in our Next.js config. And then our second function is a create get new path helper. This returns a function by passing it the create get path and your route config from the previous step. This get path function will allow you to get the right URL for the right locale. And because I forgot to disclose that, it's also important to note for that function, we do have the :name in this example. That's the same format that Next.js uses for its routes. The :name means that it's a path parameter. It can be :ID or something, would work the same, but here it's, for simplicity's sake, just a name. You can, in the getPath function, over here then, the getPath function will return you a function. You can use the destination. You can give it the destination path parameters if there are any, and then you can pass the locale to override the current locale if you, for example, want to go from English to German or something like that. But if you don't pass the locale, you don't have to. Then it will just take the current locale. So the final product will look something like this. So your the imports, your routes in a separate file, your available locales, your route config, and the getPath function, all exported from one file. And then, as I mentioned before, we need a build step because the Next.js config only takes JavaScript files. It has no idea how to parse a TypeScript file. So in this example, we use TSUp to just simply bundle the index.ts file, which will spit out a dist folder with index.js, mjs, and then types file, and index.dts. This will be used to import in the Next.js config and to export our getPath function with the typed destination fields. Then the next step, if after we build, we include the rewrites in our Next.js config. So we import our route config from our own package in our repo in this case, but you can, as I mentioned, just import it from your local, from a path locally in your, if you're not using a monorepo. Then we also include a default i18n object, and we pass it the default locale that's on our route config, the locales, all the available locales we have on our route config, and we turn off the locale detection from Next.js itself because our library will handle it for us. And then we also include all our rewrites into the rewrites function from the Next.js config. And then as a last step, you just call the getPath function anywhere where you please. So as I mentioned, you have the destination field, which is completely type safe and will also throw type errors when you pass in a destination that does not exist. Then you can pass path parameters. In this case, I pass my name, and it will return the right URL for your Next.js link, or you can use it with the link component from Next.js. You can use it with the router push command or the router replace command. That doesn't really matter. It will work everywhere in your Next.js application. So what are the cons and the pros from using this approach? The cons, yeah, maybe I should say the con, in my opinion, because yeah, we need a build step. That sucks. It always sucks to have a build step. But we need a build step for our Next.js application anyway. So I think the pros really outweigh the cons here. So the pros, type safety. We go from having no idea what's been put in our, what routes we have, how we would navigate our Next.js application, to have, I think, almost complete type safety. on the path, only the path parameters are not yet type safe. But as I said, our destination is type safe, everything is type safe, our locales are type safe. So we know when we make a mistake beforehand and not when it's in production, which is really important. We have a stable and untested solution. So we know it's gonna, we know it works now, we know it's gonna work in a week. And if we want to upgrade it, if we want to add new features to it, we know we can test it, we have tests and we are ready to expand it if need be. And most importantly, we have translated routes where this was all about. Then I have a little small demo. Let's see how I'm going to do that. Maybe I just mirror it again. No, that's not what I wanted to do. Yeah, whatever, I can maybe just like this. Yeah, don't mind the styling, it's just the, and yeah, I can see my mouse, of course. There we go. So we have all our locales in a simple language switcher. So you can pick a language to switch to. So for example, if I go to, I think it's German that I pressed on now. Yeah. So you'll see my name changes. And if I'll go to the home page. So you can see that the home page, the URL only appends its locale at the end. And if I go to the welcome screen here, once again, you can see in the URL, I think this one is the most obvious, that it changes to the locale I pressed. And then I can also go to the speaker profile where I was earlier. And you can see here in the URL, my name gets preserved, even if I change the locales, the path parameters, etc. If it would be an ID or my name or whatever, stays in place. So that was my presentation on how to get translatable routes working in Next.js in the Pages router, of course. If there are any questions? Oh, yes.
Yeah, thanks. Did you try this already with the new Next app router?
With the app router, there is a solution we just discovered, start using. There is Next Intel for another internationalization library for Next.js, and it has these features built in the translation library itself. Where it is for the Pages router, it does not exist, but for the app router, the Next Intel package handles that for you.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Yeah. When using an export to have a completely client-side application, I assume that doesn't work because you need the node server for the rewrites.
Okay, could you repeat that question? Because
okay, yeah, okay, I have to hold it close. So if you have exported project which runs in the client without the node server, I assume it won't work because you need the rewrites.
Exactly, yeah. So this in this example, we use the Next.js config to define our rewrites for the languages. But this will only work if you or run it on a node server or you run it on Vercel itself. This will not work if you just export it as JSON HTML files and serve it with an Nginx server, for example. This will only work when you use the node's server it comes with. That's correct. All right, thank you for your time. Okay.